Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Self-Publishing Tips and Tricks Show, a series designed to give you insight into the world of self-publishing and marketing your books. I'm Morgan Lee, and I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Shannon, writing under the pen name SC Huston.
And I'm Ben Pick.
Today, we are here with author duo Bradley Lejeune. We're going to ask them questions about their self-publishing journey for their debut novel, The McMurdo Rift, and how they've marketed their book. But before we jump into the interview, do you all have any news or points of interest you would like to talk about first?
Yes, so this interview will come out September 15th, which we are interviewing and doing the podcast as of June 12th. So we're quite a bit of ways in the future before this actually comes out. My book just launched, the third book in my trilogy launched last week, and I've had really great sales, better sales than I did for my second book launch overall. So I'm really happy. Even I remember with my second book launch that first week, I think I sold 83 books of Soul of a Rose, and I'm already up to 142 books of Soul of a Rose on this one. Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I'll be having some videos that'll come out about what my marketing strategy was. And I didn't have as many downloads of Blood of Lily as I did back in January. And I'm going to talk about the things I think that might have changed that. I'm pretty excited where I'm at right now.
Wow. Yeah, I don't have much going on. My book should be out a month after as of this posting. So come to my channel. I post videos every Monday night, 7 p.m. and I'll be giving out updates then.
Awesome. The only thing I have, I'm going to speak it into existence, that book 2 will be releasing this month sometime. So either it's already out or it's about to come out. Book 2, Seed Among the Rocks in my trilogy. So I'm excited for that. So I'm going to get it done. So now let's talk about our guest authors today. Bradley Lejeune is the ingeniously abbreviated combination of writers Malcolm Bradley and Martin Lejeune. Malcolm has worked for 8 years as a freelance ghostwriter, while Martin has a background in filmmaking and visual effects. They figured that attempts to forcefully join their various talents with one another might result in some good books, or crimes against nature. Only time will tell. Martin loves graphic design, reading sci-fi, and he dreams of one day writing a spy novel. Malcolm is a total fantasy nerd with a leaning toward horror, who identifies a little too strongly with zombies. They met far too many years ago while working in a cinema together, except that they talked about movies and never did any work. So let's welcome Malcolm and Martin, the duo behind Bradley Lejeune.
Hi, I'm Martin. Thanks so much for having us. It is an absolute delight to be here.
Hi, I'm Malcolm. Yeah, thank you very much again. And hi, everyone.
All right. So before we jump into questions about self-publishing and marketing, had either of you published anything before you published the McMurdo Rift?
I'd put out a short story called This Postbox Has a Time Hole in It, which is like a 5,000-word story I'd written for a competition. And I was a bit like, is there a website I can dump this on? Is this what you put on Wattpad? And I was just like, let's just put it up on Kindle and figure out how that works. And I just put it up for 99 cents and said, this is 5,000 words. Don't, come asking where the other 95 words are or anything like that. It actually did okay. People were reading it in KU and, I sold a couple of dozen copies, which was more than I was expecting. And it really just let me learn the interface and figure out what I was doing, which is really good to do on something that isn't your first novel.
Yeah, no, I've not really. I published on Kindle something several years ago that I wrote about 20 years ago as a sort of a kind of first ever novel, and it's out there under a pseudonym. But otherwise, I've not published anything myself. As a ghostwriter, there's probably quite a bit of my work out there, but once it's gone, I tend not to look too much and just let it be, sort of thing. So, but yeah. Otherwise, that was it.
It's kind of a literary equivalent of saying that you've got a really hot girlfriend, but we wouldn't know her because she goes to another school.
Yeah, it's just that.
Oh, great. So who actually came up with the idea of co-writing first, and what made you guys want to co-write this book together?
That was me, because we'd done NaNoWriMo together, hadn't we?
Yeah.
A little while ago, as a sort of a thing of trying to encourage each other to be productive, and it worked pretty well, really.
That would have been 2020.
Yeah. I think I had that thing that probably a lot of ghostwriters get of writing a lot of books for other people and getting really frustrated that I was never putting anything out myself because it was always the last priority. So yeah, I thought, well, sort of got on to Martin and said, do you fancy writing a book? Because he'd done NaNoWriMo, but really I knew Martin initially as a filmmaker and a sort of special effects whiz, because we'd even sort of worked on a film years ago, hadn't we, together? And yeah, not really sort of sure whether he'd really want to, but thinking Martin's really good at being organized and things as well, which I'm not so much. And yeah, no, it just really worked kind of.
And that's when I said no.
Different jobs. I think you were quite suspicious at first, or not suspicious, but you were.
Well, it's like the reluctant hero in the hero's journey. You got to refuse the call. And I'm just like, I've just written a novel all on my own, and I think some of it's got quite good spelling. So obviously, I don't need anyone else. And then I remember that we don't really get to hang out much, and that writing is lonely and sorrowful, and it would be much nicer to do with a friend.
Can you tell us a little bit about your journey in creating the McMurdo Rift?
Yes, Malcolm came to me with the idea of a series rather than just a book, and it was a completely different genesis to anything I've written before, because I drafted a couple of novels that are on a shelf somewhere, never see the light of day, which is a really good thing to do, because if you've written a book, you can't sit there thinking it's impossible. If you've written a book, it's probably terrible and you should probably try again. It's generally good advice. So it was kind of more like developing a TV show where we were like, how do we come up with characters and settings that can generate story potentially limitlessly, and things that we can keep coming back to, maybe for years? We spent about a month going, what genre do we even want to do? Rather than doing the sensible thing and sitting down with like Publisher Rocket or any of the things that tell you what genres are hot right now. We sort of looked inside ourselves and came up with, what genres are closest to our hearts, and then had a big fight over who got to win. And I rather insisted that it should have spaceships in, because I know that better than anything else and can write it in my sleep. And if you've read the book, you'll see I did.
You wrote it in your sleep?
So, yeah, might as well have done. Or at least I got Malcolm to write it whilst I slept. But yeah, so I looked at things like Babylon 5, Deep Space Nine, The Expanse, and these are all things that sort of develop one little corner of the story world and write out from that. And we knew that we needed to have a place where our stories were set, and we needed to do the world building and figure out what that place was. And once we'd done that, we could then go further afield with that foundation in place. That was how I came up with the idea of a place called the McMurdo Rift, which the title was actually one of the last things we came up with, because you either come up with a title first or last, and I almost never come up with it first. The only title I've ever come up with first is a spy comedy called Would It Kill You to Be Sybil, which no one seems to think is a good idea. So I just had this book. I'm like, I've no idea what to call it. And we were coming up with Tears of Empire and all these sort of epic names. And Matt was just like, yeah, that sounds like a fancy book. You can't call it that. I really wanted to come up with something like a Game of Thrones, where the series would have like the same ring to it. And that led to me getting a call from Malcolm going, I'm just going through my notes. Why do I have da written down?
I don't know. A game of, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah. We kind of had the sort of the characters kind of came in quite quickly, didn't they, as well, sort of thing, which was yeah. We kind of had the broad idea of the world, but the characters kind of came in and sort of took it on quite strongly as well, didn't they? I think. And
yeah, I basically started with, as I do with most things, with Casablanca. Yeah. And it's like, okay, let's start with a world-weary guy in the middle of nowhere running a bar and take it from there.
Rick, wasn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, we wrote the first draft with temporary names, which is something Malcolm does, which is absolutely wonderful, because I have stopped dead in my tracks for days before now when I don't know what to call the character with one line in a scene. And we wrote the first draft with the main character ended up being called Mark Franklin, and then the female protagonist is called Sarah Shah. And the first draft, they was called Henry and Nell. And I was just like, Malcolm, space heroes aren't called Henry.
I can't even remember why it was Henry. Yeah, or Nell, for that matter. So I think what was our we had the name for ages, wasn't it? That we had was Project Gibraltar, and I can't again remember quite why.
Yeah, like I knew that for this, like even though it was sort of a backwater, it had to be interesting, and for it to be interesting, it sort of needed to be where different empires crossed over. It just made me think of the Rock of Gibraltar, where it's like a British enclave where Europe meets Africa, and I thought, yeah, that will work as a project name. Then I put a massive reference to that in book 3, which no one's ever going to know about.
Well, no, now.
Yeah.
So how did you decide on your pen name?
So originally we were just going to take up half the book cover saying it was, you know, by Bradley Lejeune and Malcolm Bradley, which is great because we're both really egotistical and like seeing our name in print, even though it does now feel like pretty much all of authortube is using a pen name and not who they tell you they are at all. But I realized from a marketing point of view that was not going to work because, you know, how do you say, join Martin and Malcolm's newsletter? It just was going to get out of hand really quickly. And one of our biggest influences is The Expanse, which isn't written by James S.A. Corey, which again is a pen name for 2 writers. And before I could even sort of get stuck into what would be the perfect pen name, which I always like the people who find really obscure movie and TV references and nick those. Like there's a guy who puts out books under the pen name Christopher Pike, who was the original captain of the Enterprise. Yes, I know that's rather April. Sorry. And then I realized that Malcolm's surname would pass for a first name, and that, you know, if we put it out under Bradley Lejeune, it kind of sounds like a law firm.
Well, so nice of you to put him first.
Yeah, if it worked the other way around, it would have gone the other way around.
Like I'd sort of done a couple of things where I'd mocked things up and sort of just started saying, you know, putting my name first. And I'd noticed that Malcolm had started going along with it before we'd even had the discussion.
I'm pliable like that.
So I know that this probably won't be the norm going forward as you guys start getting some fans of your work. But when I first signed up for your guys' newsletter, I only knew Martin, and I knew Martin was writing a book. I didn't know Martin was writing a book with Malcolm Bradley. So when I got that first letter and it said Malcolm on there, I was like, did I get the wrong newsletter? And I almost unsubscribed. And then I realized you guys took turns writing the newsletters back and forth. So, but it took me a minute.
I'm really bad at going on YouTube and taking all the credit.
No, I mean, we see you. We don't really see Malcolm on YouTube. So
that's because he's terrified.
I'm definitely not as sociable as Martin. Definitely as sort of as out there.
For a reference that most of your listeners will be far too young for, I'm the Wayne and he's the Garth.
Well, you got to have that yin and yang, you know, relationship to help each other out, and I think it's worked so far. I mean, you guys have put out this great book, so.
I mean, I wouldn't say great. I'd say adequate.
Oh, no.
Slightly above adequate.
I thought you were supposed to be in marketing.
Yeah.
Yes, but I'm also British.
So what, that means you got to be honest?
No, it just means that I have to say I'm great and then apologize.
Oh, deprecating. So did you guys always know that you wanted to self-publish the book, or did you guys consider traditionally publishing it at all?
I think it was always, wasn't it, right from the word go. It was something we were aiming particularly for Amazon and Kindle and go from there, sort of thing. I think.
Yeah, and Malcolm had been working on these books. It was just sort of like, wait, if someone's paying me to write these, then there's probably money in it. You know, we should have a go at it. And I'd been looking at a lot of stuff by Chris Fox and people like that who were talking about actual strategies for self-publishing. And it was completely different to how you'd approach traditional publishing, because everything to do with traditional is like, no, you don't write a series, you write one book and you pray that someone would ask you to write a second one. Whereas what works with self-publishing is having a series and having it quickly. So the idea was always, how can we put out multiple books in relatively quick succession?
Yeah, I think as well, through some of my ghostwriting, although when I first started ghostwriting, I was mostly writing books for that were going out to Kindle for sort of people who were sort of published out to Kindle. As I've gone on, I've become more involved with traditional publishing, and as wonderful as it is in some ways, I think sometimes it can be a lot of work for not necessarily a lot of financial reward, which obviously writing isn't all about money, but it's sort of, I think it's both of our dreams that we would like to be able to,
not be doing it at a loss.
Yeah, well, not for starters, but to be able to write what we would like as a full-time job. And in some ways, crazy as it may sound, self-publishing is an easier route to that. Maybe not an easier route to superstardom or to being Stephen King or whoever, but it's maybe a better route to a career in writing.
Speak for yourself. I want to break into musical theatre.
And I think, Malcolm, you read my mind, because I was going to ask you with your ghostwriting if, you had more experience with one side or the other, and that might have swayed your opinion. But I think you pretty much covered that. Yeah, because that led you to thinking about what would be the best path for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and it sort of, it was an element as well of seeing other people do it, sort of thing, or kind of, collaborating with other people who were doing that and going, yeah, I'd kind of, I'd kind of like to sort of go that way too, but with something that, just that we were sort of completely in control of, as it were. And yeah, it was, I think the traditional publishing does have sort of some of its advantages in terms of you've kind of got to source everything yourself when you're self-publishing, in terms of, editors and proofreaders and all the rest of it, sort of thing.
I've spoken to traditionally published authors who talk about their publishers basically emailing them, like ask them for lists of like any podcasters they know or any YouTubers they know or other social media influencers to try and get them to do their own marketing. You do kind of wonder what's in it for you if they're not even doing that. And it's great if you are Stephen King, who, why wouldn't he be listening to this? He loves tips and tricks. But if you are lower down the totem pole, then potentially you are better off just hustling for yourself, because you'd have to do it anyway.
And yes, Mr. King, if you are listening, we would gladly love to have you on here as an interviewer or interviewee, and or honestly as an interviewer. You could have my seat right now. Anyways, sorry. Aside from Chris Fox, did anyone else inspire you to want to do self-publishing?
Yes. The Write, Publish, Repeat by, is it Silver and Stone they're going by now?
Sterling and Stone.
Yes. Write, Publish, Repeat by Sterling and Stone. See how I left you with a clean take there? Ain't I nice? It's not my first rodeo. That was a really useful sort of roadmap on how to do it and how you lay out a series for self-publishing and what to look out for and what the pitfalls are. Again, it sort of doesn't really set everything up as a get-rich-quick scheme, which for some reason, some stuff on self-publishing does. But that sort of had a very grounded approach to marketing and to like not expecting things to happen overnight, and was really useful in just steps to follow.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like a system, but it wasn't pretending to be the system, sort of thing. And I quite like systems, right from the, for the whole process, because again, I'm not naturally the most organized person. So if someone gives me a framework, then I think that was, that was.
They
really
also talk about like setting up a book. So you like have one person develop characters and locations and whatnot, and then pass it over to someone else for outlining, which helped us when we were figuring out what worked for our process.
I really like Joanna Penn as well. She's one of those people I just love listening to her podcast anyway, because she's so kind of enthusiastic, and I think sometimes, particularly for writers whose process takes so long and sometimes feels so lonely, even when not so much when you're working as a duo, but I think it's still just listening to people who are enthusiastic about it, and you just feel like you can. And because it's the six-figure authors as well, I've always loved listening to them, because again, it's just you just hear them talking about it and you just realize, okay, there's people out there doing it, they're doing it successfully, and it's just quite inspiring, I think. So absolutely.
Do you mind if I just ask one really quick question about Sterling and Stone? Because a lot of their material, it came out in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. And so did you find that was still valid, or has it since not been as helpful or become outdated?
They sort of address it, because they have put some, I think it was 2017, the more recent book. I read Write, Publish, Repeat, which did come out, I think, in about 2014. And then The Fiction Formula was the more updated one, which was from 2017 or 18, I think. And a lot of what they say, they do address like how, you know, things change, but a lot of the fundamentals stay the same, in that you want to have a series and you want to have a reader magnet. Those sort of things do tend to, you know, and a lot of what they're talking about in marketing is stuff that goes back to having soapboxes on before daytime TV and that kind of thinking. So a lot of it was more timeless than you might initially suspect. A lot of it was just have a newsletter.
What was one misconception that you had about self-publishing before you actually did it?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think we're probably still at that stage where I think we're going to discover some of those things as we go a little bit. I think for me, and I'm lucky being with Martin, is I think the sort of the tech side of it and the need to kind of interact with certain different platforms, and you don't just throw this book at Kindle and it sticks sort of thing. I didn't kind of have that complete and utter idea that it was super simple, but I think I didn't quite understand how much was involved. So that's definitely why I have a Martin.
I did a lot of YouTube stuff when it was a lot newer than it is now. What I'd find is I'd release a film and then I'd literally go around to everyone I had on social media and tell them about it. And that was the most effective way to get views quickly. And, you know, at times I managed to get 1,000 views in a week. As soon as you stopped doing that, it all just died off. And I was sort of expecting the same with the book, just kind of get, you know, maybe 10 sales from good intentions and relatives and friends, and then just nothing. And we've actually had reasonably consistent sales for the most part, which has just been amazing.
It's good to hear, especially I know we were just talking about the process that you guys did for maybe ARCs, and you're talking about a soft launch. And then you were talking about Joanna Penn, who penned the recent novel with, I can never say his last name, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. I don't know how you say his last name. But The Relaxed Author, in which she basically talks about launching books without all this fanfare and how that makes you more of a relaxed author. You don't have all this pressure. So I think that's kind of interesting, like that you mentioned Joanna Penn, and it's kind of the same method you guys took, or at least from what I understand, the way you said it to me behind the scenes here, Martin. So,
yeah, I think I definitely had the idea that we would have that little burst of sales in the first couple of days, and that might be it possibly, or it would be sporadic. But it's the consistency has been quite a revelation.
Yeah, I did work quite hard to manage expectations and stop you buying any swimming pools before it was time.
Buying a new house. So do you guys have any idea of what has helped those sales stay steady?
Well, I've had a lot of luck with Facebook ads, firstly, and I also broke all the rules and I designed my own cover. Then I, mad on my own power, went on to make a book trailer, which is generally ill-advised, but in a previous life, I was in VFX in French TV. I knew what I could do well and what I could do in a couple of afternoons. So it's a 30-second compilation of shots of planets with a voiceover from the POV of the protagonist, basically setting up the blurb of the book. And it was something I was doing a live stream on Barrett Laurie's channel at the start of the year, where he did like a 6-hour stream where he got about 100 authortubers on to introduce themselves. So I went on, he was like, right, here's Martin, I'm going to go and do something technical, and left me talking to a load of authortubers I didn't actually know. And they're like, so tell us about your book. And in a moment of panic, I just blurted out this quick description. Someone was just like, whoa, I'd read that. So I was like, right, let's note that down and use it later. So I put it into first person and use it as trailer. And then I put that out as a Facebook ad. I think because it's video has helped keep the cost per click really low. And it's just been really successful in converting, and we've had some really good sales.
Wow, that I would have never even thought about using a video as part of an ad. Now I haven't done Facebook ads, but I know you get to make your own ad with Facebook.
And I've heard good things about just putting pictures in like a slideshow and having it be a video file. And just because less people are doing it, it's less competitive. Now I've told everyone else to do it, which seems ill-advised.
Hey, we're still a small channel, so don't worry about it.
Not once you get your video ads up.
Yeah. So with that in mind, you've told us what's worked really well. Are you comfortable discussing any publishing missteps or things you would have liked to have done differently with the McMurdo Rift?
Certainly one thing that really really caught me out was I'd never hired a proofreader before, as particularly within ghostwriting, that's something someone else was doing and maybe coming back to me afterwards. But I kind of assumed, I think particularly with how I spec'd the job, was that I was going to get something back that I'd look over for a couple of hours and that would be it. But the proofreader who we hired did a wonderful job in terms of really going into depth with the text, which was, it was awesome in some ways, because I think I've definitely over the years as a writer got to that sort of thing of actually getting quite a lot of pleasure from looking at something that someone else has looked at and getting a lot of red over it. It used to be terrifying initially, but now you're like, well, this is exciting. Do you know what I mean? I can make it better. But we'd left it quite late, and what was supposed to be a few hours job took me about 2 days of pretty virtually non-stop work. Everything else had to go on hold for that time being. To get it done, with Martin going, where's my manuscript? It needs to go up. It needs to go up, sort of thing. So that was something to learn, to maybe don't leave some of those things quite so late.
There was a couple of things where we needed to tweak the manuscript, which meant tweaking the Word file, tweaking it in the formatting software, getting your digital files, and then getting them back up on Amazon. And stuff that, you think would take 30 seconds is suddenly stretching out into, half an hour, and then waiting for Amazon to confirm the new copy. Got the poster done up behind me. Martin points to poster behind him. And I'd done a load of tests to make sure the black levels worked, and then I got a proof copy back which completely crushed all the black levels. There's a ship in front of a planet, and you can basically see the running lights on the ship and not much else. At that point, because it takes up to 72 hours to approve, and this was about 80 hours out from release, I basically pushed all the brightness levels up and clicked go, and it's then went back afterwards and did a slightly tweaked version, and just sort of getting that right has been an education.
Yeah, so for our audio listeners, he has a poster of the cover of his novel, The McMurdo Rift, behind him, and he pointed to a picture of the proof copy of the book, which was slightly darker, as he described, where the shadows kind of overpower some of the nuanced details. That's fascinating that you were able to push everything through in 80 hours with 80 hours to go. So that's really encouraging from my side, because I'm approaching some of those hard limits, and I'm getting a little nervous.
It was funny because, and this will probably be of interest to about you guys and no one else, but I said this is the first print, which I think you guys have the slightly improved version.
Yeah, we're all just holding up our own copies of the book that we won or purchased.
I said that I was going to tweak the cover, and Richard Holiday threw us drop because he then had the first print, and Chris Kenny was like, I'm buying it now so I don't get your improved one.
Limited edition.
Yeah, collector's edition one day.
Absolutely.
If a traditional publishing company came to you and wanted to publish the McMurdo Rift and the rest of the series, would you go along with it, or do you want to retain that control?
That's a really good question.
It depends, on how much autonomy we'd have and how much was being offered. If they were gonna say we want to do it like this and put your name on it, probably not. If it was just bankrolling us, we'd have a conversation. I've always said that I'd love someone to come along and make a terrible film of it, like is it the Ursula Le Guin series, the
sci-fi Legend of Earthsea?
They had the rights to it, and they had to make a film in like the next half hour, so they just did something terrible to retain the rights. And I'm more than happy for someone to roll trucks up of money to ruin my book.
Film rights, isn't it? Is always the it's always the thing that's very attractive. I think for me, I mean, obviously, the interesting thing of being co-writers is obviously it's sort of anything like that is always going to be a discussion. But I think for me, I'd be very open to it. I think from the point of view of, I feel that I think for us too, and I certainly feel this personally, but I think between the two of us, I think we could. I don't worry about ideas and about Do you know what I mean? Having fresh ideas and new things. And if a traditional publishing adventure didn't work out, then, you know, there's always the next thing. Do you know what I mean? I think I very much kind of have that sort of mindset about it. So yeah, like I say, I think it's always going to depend a bit. But yeah, I think I'd definitely sort of be open to it, because I think from what I can see a lot nowadays as well, you do get a lot of sort of self-published writers who are doing some traditional publishing, and traditional publishing writers who are kind of coming out of it a little bit but still kind of keeping in, and, you know, it seems a mix is possible. So I think that'd be quite interesting in a way.
What is one advantage and one disadvantage from working with a co-writer?
You don't have to do all the work, but you don't always get your own way.
Yeah, no, it's I think for me it's really Martin is really motivated and kind of really good at keeping fixed on that goal sort of thing. So that's a sort of really good advantage. You know, I've you know, as much as sometimes, you know, I'm typing "go away" sort of thing, having someone sort of digitally prodding you is a really good thing. I think for, you know, for both of us to keep each other honest, to have someone to be responsible to. Absolutely.
We were asked on the launch stream, like, what the release plan for book 2 is, the McMurdo Triangle, and Malcolm decided to blurt a date out, which we hadn't fully agreed on. Next time we had a conference call, I sort of said, right, so if we want to hit this date, let's work backwards. 2 weeks before, we need to have everything ready to go. 2 weeks before that, we need to get it to beta readers. 2 weeks before that, and so on and so forth. And then he said, oh, but that's in 4 weeks' time.
You know, in the military, call that throwing your partner under the bus.
Yeah, you've got to have targets. You've got to have deadlines. Well, maybe I do, but then I just drag Martin along with me.
Yeah, there you go.
We do need to get an author headshot sorted out, and I really want to do one where I'm just like dressed up to the nines in a business suit and Malcolm's just a dirty hippie.
You can always do one of those couple mashups where it takes both of your features and sort of merges them together.
Oh, that's a great idea. I like that idea. I like that a lot. Yeah, because
a baby would look like between Martin and Malcolm.
I'm definitely really like, but Martin before kept sort of kind of trying to get me to do a sort of a professional sort of, you know, get something decent done, and I keep sending him cutouts of family photos, like, you know, us at the beach sort of thing with me cropped out. That's what he gets.
Well, I did ask for a photo for promotional purposes, which I usually do like the morning of the live of the show, and I only got Martin's, and I thought, well, I guess maybe he's just the face of you guys.
Oh, the handsome one.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's
Well, if you guys could only pass on one thing to aspiring self-published writers, what's your best self-publishing tip or trick?
Pick a genre and stick to it and learn it and master it. Like, don't think that you've come up with something new because no one wants to buy it.
Yeah, I think for me it would mostly be don't panic. I think there's probably most of the way through, maybe not, you know, with a day to go, you know, and something back from the proofreader or something, but generally you've got your own time. There's again, the advantage of self-publishing is generally someone isn't hanging a big deadline out in front of you, whereas other times, you know, working for other people, or, you know, if you were sort of to traditional publisher's schedule, I think there's pressure on you, and you don't have to put that pressure on yourself. It's produce something good and then go and publish it.
Aside from the Facebook ads, which really turned out to be quite a success story, did you do any marketing for the McMurdo Rift?
Yes, we did a launch on Barrett Laura's channel, which was really a triumph. Basically, I'd started doing authortube a year ago. This month is the anniversary of Flash Aha. It was never really, I'm going to do authortube so everyone buys my books, but it was sort of a soft marketing, get my name out there, get my face out there, and get into the community. The whole time I was just like, is this, you know, because it's so much work. It's one of those things that could have been a colossal waste of time. You know, it would have been fun and we'd have done it anyway. But the fact it paid off has been one of the most rewarding things. And so many people who have got to know, have all gone, oh, yeah, I've got the book. Or, you know, and there's even people that I don't really, you know firsthand that have popped up in chats and been like, oh, yeah, your reader magnet's out. I'm going to check that out. I'm like, you're on the list? Wow. And that's just been phenomenal.
Yeah, Martin takes care of all the, as far as for me, Martin takes care of all the marketing. He's definitely the genius for that. I think certainly for in terms of marketing copy and that, I think that's something that I think going forward we're going to have a lot of fun sort of bouncing back and forth. But again, I think that's a good advantage of the co-writing is you've always got someone straight away to kind of read something with a critical eye.
And it's like, because I was talking to you about blurbs, because Shannon, you said that you'd outsource them. And I remember thinking, wow, you've done all this and then you outsource the blurbs. That seems a bit odd. And then we're trying to come up with the blurbs. It's in tears going, how do we outsource this? It's horrible.
It's a whole different skill set to write a blurb than a book.
And like, it's so easy when someone comes to you and goes, oh, I'm trying to write a blurb for their book. And you go, oh yeah, da-da-da. And then you try and do your own and you're just like, well, no. And like, especially for sci-fi, because it's like we take place 10 years after this war that sets up the status quo, and it's like, why did we set the book in the McMurdo Rift? Why didn't we set it in New Jersey? Everyone knows what New Jersey is.
So you mentioned the book launch on Baird's channel. Do you think that was the best type of marketing that you did for this series, or was there something else that worked really well for you?
It's mainly putting your finger in as many pies as you can initially and seeing what gets traction. At the moment, I am having lots of fun and adventures in the land of TikTok, which is something I never thought I'd try, but it was actually Victoria Wren, who is an amazing author from Essex, who suggested it. And I knew I was doing the trailer and I wanted to get that out as much as possible. That's going really well. I'm getting about 600 views on each thing I post. I'm not sure if that's really translating to much or if it's just 600 people watching for a second and moving on, but I'm starting to get followers pretty regularly, so I'm sticking with that. It's a combination of trying everything and not wasting your time and pushing and pulling until you figure out what's working and what isn't. One of the things we figured out straight away was that we needed to get a war chest together and started putting money aside for a marketing campaign early on so that you've got the money to use and you're not scrambling for pennies and then panicking if you don't see results immediately.
Well, a lot of things that published authors will say, the self-published authors, is that the money you're making from your book right now, you take that and you set it aside for your next book's marketing.
Yeah, but we've spent it already on proofreaders.
They were thorough though, so yes.
We did do a really good job of bootstrapping. Interestingly, the origins of that phrase, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, was as a demonstration of something that wasn't possible. But you know, with our combined skills, you know, I was able to do a lot of the graphic side of things. Malcolm was able to do a lot of the editing. We didn't spend too much going into it. So, you know, you hear some people spending thousands and thousands, and you're just like, I hope you like your story.
It's a difficult balance, isn't it? Because you know, there's all that sort of sense that says, you know, in some ways, given that the opportunity, you would outsource editing and proofreading and everything to the nth degree for fear of problems. But I think that is not to say that you would accept any lower quality, but I think it's a thing again when you have that control of the copy that's going out, except that you might have to go back and things might get found. You might have to go back and change that.
It's difficult because I'd never suggest anyone else design their own cover, but I'm special. But I'd
admit that, and I knew what Martin could do. I'd seen his work in special effects and so on, and what he was capable of. But when Martin first said he was going to design the cover, there was that little bit of me that was like, but podcasts, but they all say, what do they say? So, but
I knew he was good, but I still didn't want him to.
It's pretty much that.
I totally get that because that was all there for me too, because I made my own book covers and I had it in my head that every podcast and every YouTube video said, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it.
I think with the genre as well, wasn't it? With the genre as well, and knowing the genre so well, and spaceships and planets and there's things as well, it's definitely
The thing was, I couldn't do spaceships. I've not really done anything with 3D modeling. You can buy 3D models, but you're looking at spending hundreds. You know, you might as well just pay someone to do your whole cover at that point. And I've done mock-ups where it's essentially the cover we have now. And you might have seen it in some of the older newsletters, which we used for when we were giving the prologue away. And it's just a planet against a nebula. It was one of those things where I'm like, it's a quality image, but does it sell the book? I could probably have talked myself into it, but I didn't really believe it. What I found was there's a Facebook group where people sell renderings of 3D characters. What people do is they will download a CGI figure and then they will put on a stock photo face. So you get something that's mostly human looking, but unique to your book, rather than just using the stock photos. And I was looking through that, and they'd actually got some spaceship renders. So I was able to get stock images that were all, it was separate from the background that I could just drop in for pocket change. It just, made everything feasible, because the way my covers are set up is I've got a planet against a nebula. Each book, the nebula is a different color. The ship is swapped out. The planet's swapped out, but it's already a template. So the heavy lifting's done.
That'll be interesting to see the progression of your covers.
Well, if you sign up to the newsletter at bradleylejeune.com, you'll see the cover for Withdrawal, our reader magnet.
Oh, I probably have seen that then. So has there been any marketing you guys have done that you wouldn't do again or didn't work very well?
I've not had a great success with Amazon ads yet. We've had one sale and it's cost us roughly the royalties from one sale, which is no bad thing, but it's definitely something I need to spend more time with and get an understanding of it and figure out what works and why it works.
From what I understand how that works, the best way that works is that when you have a series, you may be spending the same exact money that you're getting for them buying that first book, or you may be losing some money, but that sale turns into additional sales for the rest of the series. You might see a difference maybe when you get the rest of the series going.
Yeah, hopefully. That's definitely the plan. And I think going forward, the idea is to focus on the first book as the series comes out rather than the sequels, because there's no point in someone picking up book 3 off a Facebook ad and then leaving a review going, I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, it'd be quite exciting to see, I think, once we've got sort of, again, that's the thing of publishing, we're aiming to publish the second and the third book fairly quickly. The sooner we can kind of see how it works when we're working with 3 books out there, that's when we'll see how it's working as a whole.
Shannon, are you going to do a box set now book 3 is out?
Yes. You must have not been at my book launch. So, because we did talk about that. Yes, I'm going to have a book set, a box set come out on the 1-year anniversary of the first book.
You've gone through Facebook ads and TikTok. Is there any marketing that you want to pivot to for either this book or the next one in the series?
I've been really reluctant to pay out for Story Origin or Book Funnel because, to get the most bang for your buck, you kind of need to drop $100. It was that whole thing of not wanting to do it before I was absolutely ready, because I didn't want to build up a list when I didn't have a book out and have people lose interest. Well, I've sort of been working on the newsletter since October. We've got a couple of dozen people on it at the moment, which we're very happy with, but we're looking to obviously grow that. Today, actually, I sent out my first swap request, so that's the next thing to focus on. And I think going forward, that's probably going to be one of the backbones of all future campaigns.
So there's a lot of resources and tips about marketing out there. So how do you funnel everything down to find what is useful for you?
If you watch a few of we sort of mentioned earlier, people like Joanna Penn and Six Figure Authors and that, definitely some of the biggest stuff they all talk about and often gets mentioned on those shows, sort of thing. I think there's there's certain sort of things out there in terms of, like we're talking about the covers and so on, that sort of thing, which, we broke a card in the wall there, I suppose. But
I think it's really easy to get caught up in how many people there are out there giving advice and going, oh, well, I better check what everyone else says in case it's different. And it's usually not. I was the idiot that went and read them all and checked. But I usually go watch every YouTube channel, read every book, get far too overwhelmed, and then go and see what Shannon's posted on her channel and do that. Like the amount of times I've been messaging other authors and being like, oh yeah, I'm looking into setting up a newsletter, I'm looking into doing that, and they've just been like, oh yeah, Shannon posted a really good video on that, go and look at it.
Well, thank you for that. So what is your best marketing tip or trick that you would pass on to aspiring self-published authors?
Know your genre and know what they want. One of the hardest things to write was the reader magnet, because it's not a fun short story to write on a live stream whilst drunk. It's a marketing tool. Ours is set a couple of years before our first book. My first idea was almost like an episode of The West Wing, with lots of people in offices talking about a political fallout. I quickly realised that whilst me and Malcolm would love that, it's not exactly in our genre, and it's not in the, it's not close enough to the first book, and we need something that's the epitome of the first book. It needs to be almost a book cover as a chapter. So we went back and we rebroke it, and we put in more action and more adventure and more people pointing guns at each other, which sounds like a recipe for disaster, but basing it on the spine of what we'd already come up with, it was a way of refocusing what we were wanting to tell, through the prism of a space opera adventure. And it really works as a nice introduction to the world, whilst at the same time being a really nice self-contained story, and gives more detail on our characters if you have read the book. Just after I'd finished it, there was an episode of Six Figure Authors where they were talking about having 2 reader magnets, and I literally stopped in the supermarket and was just like, oh, I don't care that would have been 40k instead of 20k. I should have done that. That would have been so much easier.
So you're saying your best marketing tip is to make sure that you have a good reader magnet that's going to speak to the audience that you're trying to capture.
I think so. With the reading magnet, that was definitely a point where we suddenly kind of stopped and went, wait, though, we've just written this whole novel that we're really proud of, we really feel hits our genre, and we were really struggling. That was harder than we thought, but it was definitely worth the extra time to get it right.
Shifting from marketing to your writing life, can you tell us how your working relationship didn't fall apart and how you've managed to, remain as friends through the whole writing of this novel? I know how stressful it can be to write a book, and I can only picture that being magnified as you are working together with someone else that you have to hand everything off to.
I think knowing each other for quite a few years probably really helped a bit, because we've over the years we have occasionally annoyed each other before, so it wasn't completely new ground when when we disagreed on something, although we didn't disagree a lot.
Yes, we did. We've known each other long enough that we have to actually go some way to actually upset each other. Like, initially, Malcolm was quite happy with pretty much everything I'd put forward, and when he finally actually pushed back against something, I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm getting a response now. This is fun.
Yeah, Moti as well. What I've sort of, in terms of the way we've worked, and kind of Martin was early drafting, and then I was sort of editing over that and everything, and most of what I come back, Martin would be quite sort of pleased with. I think when it does sort of something that's sort of disagreed with, or maybe I've not included something that I've sort of changed something that Martin quite likes, sort of thing. I think we're generally quite tolerant with each other, aren't we, in terms of hearing each other out and not coming to big disagreement about it.
We've got a really good complementary set of skills, which I think is really unique. My strengths lie in a lot of the upfront outlining and drafting. Obviously, because your day job is writing anyway, I'm better at just getting in and getting words down relatively quickly, whereas you're good at taking some hastily written mess and making it legible.
I really do love working with a story that's already there. I find it really enjoyable. I think it's also that for someone who does it for a living, I'm pretty bad at outlining. I'm a real natural pantser. Martin isn't at all, which is something that's really worked really well.
I have to be really careful, because I did one of these once and I was just like, yeah, it works out well because Malcolm's good at spelling. Which obviously thoroughly undermines all his contributions and hurts his feelings.
Yeah, especially because, Word's got a spell checker anyway.
Well, that's good. You guys have different skill sets that can complement each other. So I think that's really cool. So how did you set up your specific goals to completing the novel? How will you tackle the workload when you write the rest of the series?
Martin's very quick at he can turn out drafts really quickly as well. And I've definitely been the stopgap a little bit. I think we found that certainly with the first book. My part was taking a lot longer than maybe had been expected. So it's something we're factoring in, I think, going forward, isn't it, a little bit? It's just knowing how much kind of mentally I have to put into it to make sure I deliver something on time has been a learning process, and will become more, I think, for the second book and the third book and everything. But
having a background in film, I'm very much about production schedules, planning things out and knowing if we need this now, then we'll need that then, and working back from things like that. If we're going to be doing a first draft, then we need it in, 2 or 3 months, which means we need to be hitting this many words a day, thinking of it in those terms rather than just, writing's my fun hobby.
And working backwards sounds like it really does help. If you know a date to shoot for, you know what you kind of need to accomplish, monthly or weekly or daily, depending on how best you work. What came first, the character, the setting, or the plot?
Probably the setting, wasn't it, mostly? But the characters came in pretty quickly, didn't they?
I mean, you have sort of all three as various blurs or unformed clay, and as you sort of shape one, you're then able to shape the others to suit it. The character of Franklin, I've got a document that was the first thing I wrote for it, which was like a half-page pitch, but the character was pretty much unchanged from the final novel. It was he was on a ship, it got lost in another side of space or something. The other characters would have slowly realised that he was this guy who was crucial in the recent war. I really wanted to have him living under an assumed identity and what have you, and Malcolm's just like, no, we don't need any of that. And I'm like, but assumed identities are really fun. But he's like, I think assumed identities are something that appeals to writers more than readers, which is the line he gives whenever he disagrees with me. I wanted to have the ending be a mirror to the prologue with them going up in fighters and whatnot. And Malcolm was just like, I think fighters is something that appeals more to writers and to readers. I'm like, Malcolm, are you just saying that?
That line's come out quite a few times, hasn't it, actually? That's a good point.
This might be a dangerous question to ask them, but are either of you working on separate projects, or are you coming together for the McMurdo Triangle, and that'll be the next thing that you push out?
Nothing he's told me about.
So the original conversation was in I think it was the 30th of December 2020. It was right before New Year's Eve. Maybe in March, do you want to? And my brain just immediately started spinning out ideas until in about mid-January, he was a bit like, we could start earlier if you want. So I started drafting the first book, which led into the second and third books before Malcolm started any of his passes. We've got rough drafts of 2 and 3. We want to adjust our process so that I do a chapter or 2 and then hand them off. So I'm kind of spinning my wheels at the moment, and I'm kicking around a few ideas, and I'd love to do something for NaNoWriMo this year, but it all sort of depends. I'm going to outline more books in the series first, and then when we are ready to proceed, we can just go straight into the other books we've got planned without having to stop to outline. But if I have time before then, I might do a solo project. Oh, sorry, I've just done that thing where I announced that to the world before asking you about it, haven't I? This is one of those things you get angry at me for.
Well, I think this is the thing, though, is where we've sort of kind of entered into this big project, which it is. It is I think a big project for both of us to sort of see, well, what is this, where can we take it, and will it be successful? Is it something, we sort of said we definitely want to get 3 books out there, and ideally maybe 6 would be good if we can get that into the series, but beyond that we don't know, do we? But then it's that sort of thing as well, as where if you do want to do something, I think you should both be free to do what you want to do, but then would you take that off on your own? Would you maybe want to bring it under the umbrella if you want to? I mean, depending on how you want to sort of what's going to work promotion-wise for us as well, and in terms of, would it be good to keep something under an umbrella that's going to grow and become something bigger? So we mostly haven't discussed any of that yet.
Yeah, we've developed the series in a way that like after I finished my first pass on book 3, I realised I should probably, start heading towards the end game. If, we feel we'd rather aim towards something new, we can wrap wrap things up early and still have a complete series with a satisfying ending. The one thing we didn't want to do, whether we do, 2 books or 3 books or 12 books, is just have an open-ended series, because we've all got those famous series that never got finished. You don't want that, because that's just, you're never going to attract an audience without hanging over you.
So can you tell us when the next book in the series will come out and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, Malcolm, tell them when the next series is definitely out.
We're shooting, really, aren't we? For end of August would be lovely, but realistically, it's probably going to be start of September, isn't it? I think is what we're looking for.
So book 3 is going to be out at Halloween.
The book is coming out when this is coming out. Then when this podcast is coming out.
Yeah, I think that probably would be about that sort of time. I think we really want to certainly have the 3rd book out. We were saying again would be really good by the start of next year.
Yeah. The second book's more of a World War I submarine drama in space, where our heroes are dealing with ships that they can't necessarily detect. There's a new luxury liner in the McMurdo Rift. Our heroes reside aboard the SS Olympic, which sort of goes round the outskirts of human-controlled space and was a lot more popular in years gone by than it currently is. So something new and modern is quite a threat to everyone's livelihoods and not entirely welcome, even if it does have much fancier crew quarters.
All right, so you have answered all of our questions. So before we wrap up, can you please tell our listeners where they can find you online and where they can purchase your books?
You can find us at bradleylejeune.com, where you can sign up to the newsletter and read Withdrawal, the short story. You can find book 1, The McMurdo Rift, on amazon.com. You can look for book 2, The McMurdo Triangle, in a few weeks, and keep your eyes peeled for book 3, The McMurdo War.
Thank you so much. So thank you both for joining us today and giving us your insight and experience. We wish you luck with the rest of your series.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah,
you're welcome. And thank you again to our listeners and viewers. October 1st, we will have Christy Stratos, an award-winning author of historical suspense, who is also a poet and essayist and runs her own editing company. So that's all we have for you today, and goodbye, everybody.
Bye.